FanDuel. With that, we say hello to a first-time guest on YouTube, but I've had this guy on many radio shows I've done in the past. He's covered the Jets since Sam Darnold's rookie season for New York Newsday. It's our guy, Iannazzone, who joins us now. Al, appreciate you hopping on. What's going on in your life, man?
Hey, Jake,
you staying busy?
Oh, of course. The Jets keep you busy. I love those graphics. I love Aaron Glenn with the superhero costume on. That's
I appreciate that. I have a funny feeling the first awful Jet defensive performance, you, Costello, Samini, all the guys on the beat, you guys are going to be making your superpower jokes in your stories.
Yeah, we have to. I mean, he did say that's his superpower. And you know, when I look back at last year, to me, that was the most disappointing thing. You know, the defense was just terrible from the beginning, and it got worse. And I don't know, they got rid of their two best defensive players, but it just wasn't good. And I kept waiting for Aaron Glenn to take over the play calling, to do something that would spark something, and it just never happened. So now it's on him. It's all on him this season, and I think that's the way it should be. I know there's some controversy there, like they were going to bring in Wink, and you know, Woody kind of pushed him, Aaron, to run the defense. Let him run the defense. Let's see what he can do. The one thing I will say, when Robert Saleh was here, he was an excellent defensive coach. We know that. And he's shown it in a couple places. Now we have to see if Aaron Glenn is an excellent defensive coach.
Yeah, that's the point I've made a lot, right? Like Aaron Glenn, whether he wanted Wink or not, and however we got here, I think the best path for him to prove he could be a good head coach is the bare minimum fixing this defense. And all the moves they've made out this offseason, most of them have been to try and fix the defense from a talent standpoint, and probably the number 2 pick in the draft could very well be a premium defensive player as well.
Absolutely. That's the way it should be, right? I mean, we know he's on the hot seat. Everybody knows that. So if you want to keep your job, the best way to do it is to elevate your defense, because that's what you're known for. You know, you said it, it's your superpower, right? So you saw the moves they made. They've made a lot more moves on defense than offense. Obviously, that's by design, because their offense, they had some players. Granted, they need a quarterback. There's no question, and they need to improve the receiver room. But the offensive line looked pretty good last year. You got Garrett coming back. We know Brees is coming back. Braylon Allen is coming back. I want to see what Adonai Mitchell becomes. You know, he was a good pickup, but we don't know what he's going to be yet. So I think you have to get some receiver help. But it's been all about the defense, and it should be, because that was the one thing they had. They had a strong defense. All of us expected the defense to keep them in games. And then if Justin Fields was anything, they would win some games. And the defense didn't keep them in games, and Justin Fields was a huge disappointment. And the season just went, you know, downhill very, very quickly.
Yep. And now you mentioned quarterback. That's where we'll start as far as some breaking news that was reported on earlier. The Jets and Ty Simpson, a marriage that could still potentially happen. Who knows if it will? Who knows if they'll do it at pick 16, if it's in the second round, or if they trade back in to the first round potentially. But Ty Simpson and the Jets, they're going to be meeting each other once again. This time will be a private workout at the Jet facility on Friday. This was first reported by ESPN's Field Yates. What are your thoughts on this, Al? Do you think Ty is in play in round one? Is he a guy they're looking at in the second round? What do you make of the news that the Jets are going to bring in Ty for an individual workout?
Well, I think it's something they have to do, right? And obviously we know he had his pro day today, and the Jets' top 2 guys weren't there. They're at Ohio State. So I think it's the right thing to do. I don't know where he's in the mix. I think Jet fans would probably go crazy if he's taken 16. I think most guys want to see a receiver go there. But with all the capital they have, if they're in love with this guy, if they think he can be something, you know, do you trade back in? Maybe you trade back in. I don't know if he falls to 33, because, you know, quarterbacks are tough. All it takes is one team to fall in love with a quarterback, and they shoot up the draft chart. So, you know, I think it's the right thing. I think you got to check him out. He looked pretty good this year. I know he struggled at the end of the season, obviously, but he's a first-time starter, and he put up some decent numbers. Everybody was impressed with his accuracy, his you know, he can get it into tight windows, things like that. He played against a pro-style defense, too, every day. You know, that helps. But let's be honest. Everybody here believes that the Jets' next quarterback is coming in next year's draft. I do think they should take a quarterback. I think you take a quarterback every year, and you see if you can develop him, because look at what's happened. You know, we know the story. You mentioned before. My first year, Sam Darnold was his first year. And look where he is now. And all the quarterbacks who have gone, you know, out of this organization. they need to hit on that eventually. And, maybe it's this year, maybe it's next year, but it's got to happen. And it's probably going to happen through the draft.
So I agree. I think where I get weary or leery, as I was being corrected by a caller, rightfully so, on the first show today, for those who saw that, where I get leery about Ty Simpson is the lack of starts, 15 career starts, and how big of an outlier he would be if he's actually successful. But he's also unique in that it's not like he just didn't get a chance to play because he wasn't any good at Alabama. He could have transferred and left and got more opportunities. He didn't want to. He stayed there during the coaching transition, going from Nick Saban to Kalen DeBoer. He played really well at the beginning of the year before the injuries and poor play by guys around him impacted things. Like, he's a great processor, which is what teams have seemingly fell in love with as far as just nuance of playing the position. Like, you could talk yourself into Ty, but I feel like I'm describing a second round type of swing at that position. I can't get behind it at pick 16. I think that's where a lot of Jet fans kind of struggle with. Yes, we need a quarterback, but we also have 3 first-round picks in 2027, so we don't need to take this big risk right now.
Right, and I think that's how everybody feels, right? That's how Jet fans feel, just based on my timeline and everything I see on social media. That it's the Jets situation, right? It's a 1 quarterback draft, and they have the number 2 pick. They could get a quarterback later. We know whether it's Carson Beck or Drew Aller. Are those guys going to be difference makers? You don't know. You really don't know. I mean, look, Zach Wilson was taken 2nd overall. Look how that worked out. He's on his 4th team in 4 years or whatever it may be now that he's with the Saints. So, yeah, I understand that. I mean, I look at it like pick 2 has got to be a defensive stud, and pick 16 should be a receiver at this point. That's how I'm viewing it. I'm not in the front office. I don't make these decisions. If they trade back into the first round and they take him 24th, 25th, I'm just throwing numbers out, would that alleviate some of your concern? You don't know, because you don't know what he's going to become. And that's the whole thing with the draft, right?
You just don't know for sure. I do agree with you. I think it's obvious they're going to take a quarterback at some point. I think there's a reason why they don't have a backup quarterback right now, because they're probably waiting to say, hey, if we take Ty Simpson as early as 16, well, then we're not going to spend big money on a backup quarterback. We want Ty to be the number 2 to get ready to play after Geno starts the year. So I think it's clear they're doing their homework on these guys. I just wonder, like, would they take someone if they like someone because they're like, we got to just keep taking swings till we get it. We'll do it again next year if it doesn't work out. Or are they thinking at it through the lens of, let's build the team. We don't love a guy. We're not going to take a guy, and we'll take someone on day 3 or something like that. And then we'll make our full pitch to ownership. Hey, our future's in 2027. Let's build up the roster this offseason going into that year.
Yeah, I could see that. The way you laid that out, that second part, I could see that. Because one thing we've seen from Darren Muji, he's been pretty calculated. He's been pretty consistent. I mean, they're not, again, I'm here 8 years, and you've seen a lot of swings, and it hasn't worked out. And Justin Fields, to me, wasn't a big swing. It was a swing, but it wasn't, bringing in Le'Veon Bell and things that other GMs have tried to do in the past to try to make this a 1-year rebuild. It isn't a 1 year. It's 15 years. It's 15 years since they made the playoffs. And Muji is not acting like he's desperate, because none of the picks, when you look at free agency and some of the trades, did anything strike you as, oh my God, they went crazy? Like, if they would have signed somebody for $30 million a year, then you're like, okay, what are they doing? They're not a couple players away. They're a lot of players away. So I like what they've done, and I think that's what they'll continue to do. I mean, I feel Darren Muji has established himself, right? Like, I think his shelf life right now is probably a little stronger than his seat is a little stronger than Aaron Glenn's right now, because he's done everything he can to build the team while not hurting the future. They have a lot of money still this year. They have a lot of money next year. They have all this draft capital, and they have the flexibility to be players next year when they need to be, or if something pops up this year, they could as well. But I think they are going to continue to build methodically, because I think that's the way he likes to do it. Will it get to a point where he feels the heat? Maybe. But I don't think that Muji feels the heat yet. I think he's going to build it the way he wants to. And it's been pretty impressive to see how he's handled this. I think we all would agree some of the trades he's made, have looked good on paper. some of them look good on the field, but now let's see what happens this year with some of these deals.
And I think that's well said. And to your point on Muji, I'm glad you said what you did there, Al, because I was going to ask you about just the dynamics of that Aaron Glenn, Darren Muji partnership. A year ago at the introductory press conference, the owner of the team referred to Muji as Aaron Glenn's sidekick. Doesn't feel like Muji's a sidekick right now. I know there's been, mixed reporting on who's actually in charge, where they stand between Glenn and Muji, but how do you view it, right? Like, is there a real scenario in your eyes where, hey, Aaron Glenn doesn't win enough games, he's not the head coach a year from now, but Darren Muji has done enough where he's a part of that coaching search and he's working with a different head coach?
Yeah, I do see that. I mean, I think that, and I'm going to take you a different path. Like, people are saying the Jets are tanking for next year. They're not tanking for next year. Aaron Glenn's trying to save his job, right? He wants to win. But I do think they're in a position where he probably has a little more equity than Glenn. I mean, I know Glenn has a good relationship with Woody, but you got to win, right? And we all understand what happened last year. The first 7 games, they were trying to win. First 10 games, they were probably trying to win. After that, things went south, and you saw what they put on the field, and it wasn't good. I don't think he gets too much leash unless there's an underlying agreement with him and Woody. Don't worry, you're getting a year 3, and I don't see that. I think they're playing to win this year. And when I say win, be competitive. That's all anybody asks for at this point, right? The Jets to be competitive, to play meaningful games in November, December. But I do think Muji has done a good job with what he turned Sauce Gardner into. I don't think they ever really wanted to trade Sauce, but, he was presented with an offer like that. And again, we mentioned Adonai Mitchell. He could be a stud. We don't know, because the quarterback play, it makes it very difficult. We like some of the trades that Muji made, getting Harrison Phillips, getting Briggs, Minka Fitzpatrick. I know people say he's not the same player, but he's still was a Pro Bowler 2 years ago, and he's a ball hawk, and he makes plays, and he's a leader in the back end. I mean, that was a good trade, in my opinion, because we know what Minka can do, and you can keep going down the list. Quinnen Williams, they got a lot back for him when they knew he didn't want to be there. They got something for Jermaine Johnson when they knew he didn't want to be here. So I think those moves have helped the organization. And I do think he is in a better spot than Glenn, just because we see the bottom line. The bottom line is 3 wins, 14 losses. And, I don't know what the number has to be this year, but if it's, under 8, I think we're having a different conversation, next year at this time.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, honestly, because year 1 can't go as bad as it goes, and then you're grandfathered in for this 3-year plan just because the GM acquired all these picks. There's got to be a baseline level of competitiveness, and you can't start 0-7, obviously. But I really think it's not only just like the total amount of wins, which of course is the biggest thing, but it's like how you get to the win total. Adam Gase, you were on the beat then. He started 1-7 that first year. He lost the entire fan base. It didn't matter that they went 6-2 against backup quarterbacks and bad teams in the second half of that year to finish 7-9. First off, I don't know if Glenn survives a 1-7 start after 0-7 a year ago, but my point is that they got to be like 3-3 through their first 6, and that's why, getting it back to the Ty Simpson conversation, it's why I'd be really surprised if they took him at 16, because Glenn should be thinking about, I need a player at 16 that's going to help me right away win games. Maybe it's a receiver for Geno Smith to score more points to save his job. Like that, to me, is why it doesn't make sense to take Ty at 16. Glenn's got to be thinking about not just winning games, but making sure he wins enough games early to kind of, save his own ass at the beginning of the season. Now I want to talk about the backup QB situation. This was Rich Cimini on the Jet Collective last night discussing some of the names to watch for the Jets at backup QB. Brought up the backup quarterback situation. While we're on that topic, what is the latest on that end? It seems like a lot of the backup names we talked about are signing elsewhere, and the Jets are sitting in a spot where I believe their quarterback depth chart is Geno Smith, Bailey Zappi, and Brady Cook.
What is it? You're saying that it's not a great depth chart, is what you're saying? Yeah. So they're obviously going to sign someone or trade for someone. You saw Joe Flacco get signed today with Cincinnati. The Jets were not interested in Joe Flacco. Woody Johnson, not the biggest fan. And also, Joe Flacco got $6 million from Cincinnati, and there's no way the Jets are going to pay $6 million for that backup job. And, Joe really likes Cincinnati. So the Jets were never in on Joe Flacco. I think it's going to be Tyrod Taylor, who's still free, And Cooper Rush, who was cut recently by Baltimore, he did not play great last year. You know, he had 2 starts. He played poorly, but he did some good things a few years ago with Dallas when he had that run when Dak Prescott was out. So he's an option.
He was good.
He had a little bit of a run there. He's not old. He's only 31 or 32. I mean, it's wide open at this point. I think they'll bring in a veteran, and I think possibly they could draft a guy. I don't think it'll be an early draft pick, but they could bring in a developmental type guy to be their 3rd quarterback.
Okay, so Cooper Rush and maybe Tyrod Taylor being brought back are the 2 names there that have been mentioned. I have a theory on why the Jets have yet to sign a legit backup. I believe Ty Simpson is in play for this regime. It might not necessarily be at pick 16. It could be at pick 33. It could be they trade back in to the end of the 1st round. But I don't think the Jets, who do have Bailey Zappi rostered in that quarterback room, feel the need to invest any sort of significant resource in a backup QB until after the draft, because I think we all believe whether it's Ty Simpson early or someone on day 3, they will add a quarterback, and depending on who they add, that will influence what they want to spend on a backup QB. I don't think Tyrod Taylor's going anywhere. I don't think Cooper Rush is going anywhere. I think you look at other teams in the league, they've already made their moves for their backup quarterback. So I don't think the Jets feel any rush, and they're going to wait till after the draft to fully address the backup QB position. And I think a lot of it, again, has to do with the fact maybe they would take Ty Simpson in under a certain circumstance. And if you take Ty, you don't need to spend any big money on a backup, because if you're making that investment in Ty in the 1st round or early 2nd round, at some point you want him to play. So you want him to be the number 2 quarterback if Geno Smith's going to start the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we look at the landscape, I think the backup landscape is just all over the place. You know, we were hearing rumblings, Jake, that the Eagles want a 2nd round pick for Tanner McKee. Tanner McKee was a 6th round pick, and he really hasn't shown anything. So I can only imagine. So if the Eagles are asking for a 2nd rounder for Tanner McKee, what could you imagine what the asking price is going to be for Spencer Rattler or Will Levis? Or, well, we know that Brissett is probably going to be the starter there. So I think the Jets are playing this correctly. You know, let's wait till we get closer to training camp, and then also know that there are a ton of guys who actually fit what we believe Frank Reich is going to do. Now, I think you can take a swing with Ty Simpson, but I think 16 is way too early. If you tell me that you want to trade back into the mid-20s, I think once Ty gets past 21, which is the Steelers, because, you know, we could do the whole Mike McCarthy, Aaron Rodgers, you know, draft a young guy that that kind of fits, that kind of almost fits the style. You know, he's a bit of a gunslinger. He takes chances, but he's not fully ready. So you have that McCarthy, Aaron Rodgers, Ty Simpson thing going. But I think once he passes 21, I think the Jets should be in play if he's your guy. But Jake, the only guys that truly fit what Frank Reich is probably looking for in a quarterback, which is 6'3" and above, 30 college starts, can manage the game, doesn't really take many chances, are going to be Fernando Mendoza, and we already know that he's going to the Vegas Raiders. Is going to be Drew Aller, who, depending on who you talk to, they're either going to love him or hate him. I haven't met anybody that says, "Oh, I'm it's give or take or hit or miss with me with Drew Aller." You either have a strong opinion of Drew Aller, or you have a very strong opinion in the adverse that you don't really like Drew Aller. And then Carson Beck. So we can play tea leaves. We're all FBI. We're all doing background checks right now. We're putting the tea leaves together. The Jets contingent was at the Miami Pro Day. We saw Frank Reich, we saw Aaron Glenn, and Darren Muji all speaking with Carson Beck. He fits that. Carson Beck is 6'4", decent arm. He's played a ton of high-level SEC football. So it's Fernando Mendoza, Drew Aller, and Carson Beck. So I think, me personally, I think it's going to be Geno Smith, Tyrod Taylor, and Drew Aller or Carson Beck. And I think next year is when you take that big swing and you really try to secure your franchise signal caller for the next decade and a half. But I think right now it's about establishing and basically setting. It's frustrating, Jake, because this should be year 2 and we should be ascending. And right now it seems like all we're trying to do is put together a foundation. You know, we tried to put together a foundation with the previous owners and their pieces and their models, and we tried to make it work, and then we had to scrap all that. So now we're still trying to build this foundation. So I think Frank Reich is going to be able to, and I think that somebody like Carson Beck is going to be a backup for a long time in this league. And I think that that's the route that they're going to go.
Look, I think if they don't take Ty, I think you're onto something there. I think maybe they're looking for that long-term backup, and Carson Beck could certainly be that. He's got the starts. He's got the height. The Jets did go to his pro day. They sent Frank Reich to his pro day, which I found to be notable as well. So I think you're definitely onto something. Aller's intriguing because of the just skill set, right? Big, has a huge arm, but mechanically is a mess. You could say he hasn't gotten great coaching, which I think is fair. But is that a guy that you want to roll the dice on in the second round? No. Third round, you don't have a third round pick. Do you take him there if you require a third round pick? I'm not sure. Is he there in the fourth round where you have 2 forts and maybe you think that's a worthwhile swing? I'm okay with any day 3 quarterback they take because I just understand the odds that no matter who they take, chances are they're not going to work out and be franchise quarterbacks because the odds of that happening are very, very unlikely. Everyone talks about, oh, well, Dak and Kirk Cousins and Brock Purdy. Now look at all the quarterbacks that get drafted, and you tell me how many of them are still in football after a couple of years.
Hey, here's the deal. Just got no chance unless you click on that like button. And you got to make sure you subscribe to the Jake Asman Show. You don't, you can get the f*** out. Now let's go, Asmaniacs. We're built for this shit.